The LA Times very much looks like it submitted the question it wanted to ask President Biden directly to President Biden prior to his presser with the South Korean president. And we know that because we saw a picture of the president holding a memo, a piece of paper with the reporter's picture and the question written out. When she was called on by same president, she asked a question very similar to the one that was written down. It was not verbatim the same, but how did he know that specific angle would be the one she'd take on that specific subject? How did his press corps figure it out? His press people. The LA Times says, we don't know. We didn't submit the question in advance. What did you submit? Did you submit the topic? Did you give an idea of the angle? Because miraculously, Karine Jean-Pierre, who is nobody's idea of a Mensa member, somehow figured it out. Your thoughts on it, Matt?
Well, this just speaks to the overall problem of media titles not treating each other as competitors anymore and acting more like a cartel. The reason you wouldn't have gotten away with this in the past is that if the White House tried to ask all of the members of the White House press corps to submit their questions in advance, at least one of them would have finked on the rest of them and said, all of these newspapers are submitting their questions in advance, and that's why they're getting called on. What this shows, I think, is that there's solidarity inside the White House press room. And look, I've been in that press room, and I don't remember them ever asking me for questions in advance. So this must be a relatively new phenomenon. But for nobody to tell on the other members of the press corps that they're doing this is a total violation of the relationship with audiences.
Because again, these reporters want to be stars. They're not looking to be star reporters. They want to be called on so they can see their face on camera. And by the way, the reason you've never been approached, I'm sure, is because they didn't think you'd be a lapdog. This reporter should be so insulted that they looked at her and said, she'll lapdog it. Let's go to her. And by the way, the fact that she didn't deny it and she just denied it through the LA Times' PR hack is an embarrassment to her. If that had been me or you, we would have been out there saying, hell no. How they figured it out, that's their business. But nothing. I gave them not the topic, not a hint, not the question, absolutely nothing. She hasn't said that. And there's a reason I would submit to our audience. All right, let's talk about this other story now, because what happened was these House Republicans who have been just on it and doing really interesting things over there decided to call in Mike Morell, who formerly was high up in the CIA, and question him. And he is the one, as I understand it, who revealed that it was Anthony Blinken, who was then at the top of the Biden campaign, that contacted him and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if you and a bunch of other former CIA and intel types got a letter together saying the Hunter Biden laptop is bullshit? It's on the record. And Morell testified to Congress, and I did it because I wanted Joe Biden to win. This is a former Bush guy. He's one of those more establishment Republicans. He didn't want Trump. And Morell testified to that in front of Congress, saying it was Joe Biden's top campaign guy, Blinken, who asked me to do it. I was only too happy to coordinate with him. And that's how that letter came about, directly from Team Biden, orchestrated by the guy who's now Secretary of State. The media has done a total blackout of the story.
It's kind of an amazing story. Michael Morell is, as you mentioned, he's the former acting head of the CIA. He would have been Hillary Clinton's CIA chief, almost certainly. He played a very important role in Russiagate, which is another kettle of fish we could get into some other time. But in this instance, what he was asked by Jim Jordan in the Weaponization of Government Committee essentially is, would you have organized this group letter calling the Hunter Biden story and saying that it has the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation? Would you have done that absent a phone call from Anthony Blinken? And Morell says no. And when Jordan said, so that triggered it, he said yes. So that's a very, very important piece of information. We don't have the whole transcript, but that tells you that this wouldn't have happened without the call from Blinken. Then he says, well, why did you do it? Because I wanted him to win. So here you have the Secretary of State who's involved basically in a massive disinformation operation. Because remember, this was a lie. This is 5 former heads of the CIA and 45 other former intelligence officials saying that this thing that came from a computer repair store owner was a Russian information operation. They foisted that on the public, at a key point of an election campaign. And I think it's a major conspiracy, and it's a total blackout in the media about this.
They're not interested at all. These same people who really, they can party with the president on Saturday and then speak truth to power on Monday. Well, there's absolutely no evidence of that. This woman who we played, Tamara Keith, president of the White House Correspondents Association of NPR, actually said, we are the representatives of the people. And all I could think was, which people? You're certainly not representatives of the right half of the country, the people in the center of the country, or even the people usually on the center left. You describe yourself as somebody who's a lifelong liberal. The reason they're losing people like you is because they're totally abandoning liberal principles. RFK Jr. still says he's a liberal, but he doesn't identify with these people at all. Alan Dershowitz still says he's a liberal, but he doesn't understand or identify with his party. So this person does not represent the people. She represents the far left of one party, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I don't even know if I would necessarily call it left, because they're pretty quiet about things that happen to the actual left too. We reported in the Twitter files about people like Jill Stein and WikiLeaks and the suppression of their speech, and nobody seems particularly interested in those cases either. I think this is a new sort of just proto-authoritarian wing of the Democratic Party. Their ideology is basically just that they want to stay in power by any means necessary. They've completely abandoned civil liberties and due process and all the things that we used to take such pride in on that side of the aisle. And I just don't recognize it. It's completely different from my vision of what the Democratic Party and liberalism used to be.
Well, meanwhile, the president gets up there and openly mocks them because he never takes their questions. Yes, he had a brief presser last week under enormous pressure from everybody to actually speak, but he never does it. He's at a record low in terms of his questions with reporters versus all other presidents. In fact, it's to the point where Karine Jean-Pierre was actually bragging recently that he takes a lot of shouted questions. We got to play this. I've been meaning to get to it. SOT 7 quickly.
So I'll say this. It is also unprecedented that a president takes as many shouted questions as this president has. And he has. Okay.
I'll tell you almost every day on this.
Okay. Well, we'll certainly get the data and share that with all of you.
Oh my God. Even they had to openly mock it. He takes more shouted questions than, okay. So what does Biden do? He gets up there and he openly mocked them. This is SOT 5.
In a lot of ways, this dinner sums up my first 2 years in office. I'll talk for 10 minutes, take 0 questions, and cheerfully walk away.
Listen to them.
They're all cheering that. How embarrassing.
Look, you did the tough thing during COVID. You paid your people and pulled your business through the pandemic. And now doing the tough thing could qualify you for up to $26,000 per employee at covidtaxrelief.org. Government funds are available right now. They've already been allotted and set aside to reward companies with 2 or more employees who stayed open during COVID. It's not a loan, and you don't have to pay it back. The program's complicated, but no one knows more about it than the CPAs and tax experts at covidtaxrelief.org. You pay nothing up front. They do all the work and share a percentage of the cash they get you. Businesses of all types, including nonprofits and churches, can qualify, including those who took PPP loans, even if you had increases in sales. You did the tough thing for your employees during COVID. Now let covidtaxrelief.org help get you up to $26,000 per employee. Visit covidtaxrelief.org. That's covidtaxrelief.org, covidtaxrelief.org. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.